This is episode 4 of the Alien Agenda series. If you missed any of the previous episodes, a link to the playlist can be found in the comments section below. Whilst doing some research, I stumbled upon an unusual story in the Italian press. The Roman newspaper Paese Sera published a letter from a prominent cardiologist in the letters section. One evening, the doctor had been called to a patient's house at a very late hour. His route took him through Borghese Park. The Borghese Gallery, with its invaluable exhibits, was in the park at the time, and the guards closed the park gates at night. However, at the doctor's request, a familiar guard opened a gate for him. The park was deserted and silent. At an intersection of alleys, the doctor noticed a silver pavilion he hadn't seen before. It had a dome-shaped on top, with a wave-like ridge down the middle, and stood on 3 metallic supports. Out of curiosity, the doctor approached and touched the ridge. The metal felt like aluminum and was warm to the touch. Suddenly, there was a soft buzzing from inside the pavilion. The ridge began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. A jet of compressed air shot out from the base, and the pavilion started to rise. It reached about 60 meters at a fairly slow pace, then suddenly disappeared from sight. The doctor was perplexed by this event. He hadn't had coffee or wine that evening and wasn't feeling stressed or excited. On his way back, he examined the spot where the pavilion had lifted off. The gravel on the path where the structure had been standing was scattered as if by a giant broom. Wishing to preserve his reputation as a sensible person, he initially refrained from saying anything about it. Eventually, he felt it was important for the public to know about such an occurrence, so he asked the newspaper not to publish his name or address. This happened in late 1972, when UFO reports were frequent. During a live radio broadcast from Rome, an elderly listener from a Turin suburb reported seeing several shining objects flying around a local mountain. They made no sound and resembled flying saucers. The host asked her to call someone else to confirm her account. A neighbor from the floor above joined in, saying that the flying objects were still circling the mountain. In France, a German geologist had witnessed a saucer flying at a low altitude over the Central Massif. He had to be treated afterward for the effects of the close encounter. He remembered the object vividly, and his description closely matched other eyewitnesses' accounts, including that of the Italian doctor. Dr. Claude Poher, an astronomer collaborating with Geppan, stated that in 1978 alone, France received up to 15,000 witness reports of saucers. Geppan had around 40 staff members, astronomers, meteorologists, atmospheric physicists, psychologists, and technical experts. By the same time, the American Center, led by Dr. Hynek, had received about 75,000 reports from 133 countries and gathered around 12,000 photographs. Most of these photos showed saucers, though many looked more like hats. Observers described various characteristics: height, 9 to 15 meters, diameter up to 20 meters, some reaching 100 or even 200 meters. Nearly all witnesses noted that the craft had 3 landing supports, and some had 6, consisting of either poles or balls. Many witnesses said that the poles retracted into the UFO upon takeoff, similar to aircraft landing gear. Nearly all observers described the structures as having a metallic sheen reminiscent of electric welding. Color varied widely. Blue is often mentioned for UFOs, though many reported sudden color changes, from blue to green, white, orange, and red. UFOs are thought to appear blue at high speed and red when slowing down. French researcher Aimé Michel linked these shifts to speed changes. American physicist James McCampbell suggested that color depends on the gases surrounding the UFO. For example, xenon glows intensely blue at first. This blue coloration might explain why UFOs are often invisible against the sky, but become visible in photos taken through yellow or especially orange filters. It's believed that silent flight and lack of overheating are achieved by using plasma to disperse atmospheric particles or water particles when the UFO submerges. Jean Goupil, an engineer at the Saclay Atomic Research Center, proposed that this effect could be due to a repulsion force field. However, he admitted he could not fully understand its mechanism. According to a table from the U.S. Congressional Committee on Science and Astronautics, there are a total of 52 types of unidentified flying objects. These can be broadly categorized into 5 main groups. Firstly, the smallest UFOs, measuring just 20 to 100 centimeters, these appear as wandering lights of various brightness levels. The first recorded encounter with them was by pilot Gorman at the Fargo Air Base in North Dakota in October 1948. He chased a glowing object roughly 30 centimeters in size. It's believed these lights are reconnaissance devices. They are remotely controlled and relay necessary data to a larger craft. They are well suited for close examination of objects and people, and they often chase cars, seemingly playing with them. This behavior supports the idea that they are linked to an external control system, which monitors them and the objects they pursue. Secondly, egg-shaped objects. These range from 2 to 3 meters in size, operate at low altitudes, and are associated with larger UFOs, within which they may retreat when necessary. Third are disc-shaped objects, ranging in size from 9 to 40 meters. These sometimes carry much smaller UFOs. Fourth are large, cigar-shaped or cylindrical objects. These large craft, shaped like cigars, cylinders, or dirigibles, measure over 100 meters in length, with the largest motherships reaching 600 to 800 meters. On rare occasions, they can even reach several kilometers. Smaller UFOs from the previous group can be housed within these. On June 30, 1973, a large object appeared during a test flight of the French Concorde over Chad, measuring 80 meters in height and 200 meters in length. It was filmed and shown on French television on February 2, 1974. UFOs of various types can move freely in both the air and water, but only the third and fourth groups of craft have been observed in the upper layers of the atmosphere. The disc shape is the most commonly recognized form for UFOs. However, some statistics on UFO sightings report different data. 30% of sightings were of spherical objects, 14% were cylindrical or cigar-shaped, and 16% were disc-shaped. There are also dome-shaped UFOs, sometimes with lattice-like domes, and other times with transparent domes. Less commonly, triangular, conical, square, and parachute-shaped UFOs have been reported. These may be special-purpose crafts designed for scanning or illuminating other objects. Many spherical UFOs appear to conceal a metallic frame masked by plasma with various colors. Some UFOs can change shape, and some cases have been recorded where they merged, divided, and radically altered their configuration. Sometimes, UFOs would join together, resembling dumbbells. If we stick to the known laws of physics, these transformations are difficult to explain. Cigar-shaped ships may have round or rectangular portholes arranged in 1, 2, or even 3 rows. The crew of the Norwegian ship Javesta observed such cigars over the Atlantic in 1965. In July 1954, an enormous cigar-shaped object approached a Stratocruiser airplane flying from New York to London near Goose Bay. It flew parallel to it at a distance of several hundred meters. 6 small disc-shaped objects orbited around the cigar. 4 F-86 fighters were dispatched to intercept the UFO. As the fighters approached, all the small objects entered the cigar, which then shot upward at a speed of 3,000 kilometers per hour. The crew and passengers observed this event for 20 minutes. Sailors on a nearby Canadian warship also witnessed it. A similar incident occurred in the Caucasus. On October 8, 1990, a radar at Grozny detected an object at an altitude of 4,500 meters. Fighter pilot Major P. Ryabyshev was given coordinates to identify the object. Upon reaching the specified area, the pilot saw nothing, although the weather was clear. On his way back, he spotted 2 cigar-shaped objects flying side by side at great speed. One cigar was 400 meters long, the other nearly 2 kilometers. According to command post data, they were 15 kilometers away. As Ryabyshev approached, the cigars instantly disappeared, though radar still showed their presence. This incident was reported by the newspaper Rabochaya Tribuna on October 20, 1990. Such UFOs have also been observed in 1976 in Sosenki, near Moscow, in 1981 near Michurinsk, and in 1985 in Gayoktepe, Turkmenistan. Some UFOs are equipped with antennas, which can tilt in various directions. In July 1978, passengers on a train from Sevastopol to Leningrad saw an ellipsoidal UFO deploying a periscope-like rod with 3 glowing points. Occasionally, 2 disks join together to become convex on both sides. In October 1989, one such combined craft hovered over the industrial tractor factory near Cheboksary. Back in 1959, people in Warsaw watched as 2 spheres of different sizes hovered over the Palace of Culture and Science. They were then joined by a cylinder, and all 3 merged into one object. In December 1969, near the village of Lezovo in the Perm region, 2 glowing ellipses merged into a sphere, which then traveled accompanied by 2 smaller spheres. They performed strange maneuvers 30 to 40 meters above a local drilling rig, and then all 3 spheres became one. It is possible that extraterrestrials used this combination of crafts to scan the area near the rig for resources such as minerals or fuel. Many such examples of aerial gymnastics exist. In June 1975, a silver triangular trapezoid appeared over Tallinn. It then became round, took the shape of the letter T, then an O, and finally flew off toward Narva. Scanning could have occurred here too, considering the radioactive shale deposits nearby. The UFO appeared to be pointing as hunters do. Similar configurations have been observed in various regions, including England, Cameroon, and Belomorsk. Sometimes these displays are accompanied by a peculiar phenomenon. The UFO enlarges in a short time. A bright orange UFO behaved in this way over Alupka in 1978. In September 1981, a group of sculptors and artists near the village of Prechestoy saw a sphere 3 times larger than the moon. As they watched, it grew even larger, eventually becoming 10 to 12 times bigger than the moon. A bright halo appeared around it, and it then vanished. The most astonishing and puzzling feature of UFOs is their flight mechanism, their takeoff process, and their ability to reach mind-boggling speeds in mere moments. This applies to both small forms and large cylindrical cigar-shaped ones. In Western Africa, ground-based radar once recorded the flight of 8 gigantic UFOs traveling at 14,000 kilometers per hour, and even that speed is far from the limit. In 1947, over White Sands, New Mexico, A spacecraft reached 40,000 kilometers per hour. In 1952, over Terre Haute Airport in Indiana, a UFO flew at 67,000 kilometers per hour. And in 1953, over South Africa, a spaceship clocked 160,000 kilometers per hour. The maximum speed of a UFO recorded by U.S. ground-based radar is a staggering 200,000 kilometers per hour. In addition, interplanetary alien spacecraft enter supersonic modes without creating the deafening boom we hear when our planes cross the sound barrier. A fleet of UFOs flew over New York on the night of November 9, 1965, causing a power outage. Power stations were unable to restore electricity. Similar phenomena occurred in other states along their path. The New York Blackout continued along their route. For 10 hours, the New England states, Maine, and the entire northeastern United States were plunged into total darkness. In 8 states, life came to a halt. Factories ceased operations, electric trains stopped running, people were trapped in elevators, phones went dead, and airfields went dark. However, investigations found no faults in the power lines or the power stations. The UFOs began by hovering over the Clay substation, which distributes electricity from the Niagara power system. First, the lights went out in Syracuse, then in the Big Apple, as New York is known. 2 UFOs followed high-voltage lines in New Hampshire, Newark, and New Jersey. 36 million Americans in the dynamic financial and economic center of the U.S. were left in a state of shock. How were the aliens able to do this? Cars stop in the presence of UFOs due to ignition failure. In the U.S., there were over 400 such cases. And in the City of Progress, Guatemala, in February 1989, a UFO stopped hundreds of cars by shining beams onto the highway. Magnetic emissions from UFOs affect people, measuring instruments, and clocks. They cause compass needles to spin and disrupt the orientation of airplanes and ships, presenting certain hazards to daily human activities. In 1978, the watches of all passengers on the Shota Rustaveli cruise ship stopped. The same happened on the Volga base ship in the Barents Sea in 1977. Many theories have arisen around this phenomenon, the most exotic being the idea that aliens can manipulate time. UFOs affect radio signals and television transmission. In September 1978, a giant UFO disabled all radio and telecommunications in Kuwait. Similar interference occurred on television in Tyumen. Such disturbances could potentially disrupt airport services, even leading to air disasters. In practice, UFOs can neutralize all urban infrastructure, industry, computers, and electronics. Was the New York blackout an unintended result of alien actions or a deliberate demonstration of their capabilities? A few years later, in Siberia, on the Baikal-Amur mainline route between Ikabekon and Mururin, the engineers of a heavily loaded train equipped with 2 pairs of locomotives experienced a similar effect. On the steepest climb, the train suddenly stopped. The engineers saw 2 spherical objects hovering over the tracks. After 8 minutes, the spheres disappeared, and the engines resumed. The UFOs returned, stopping the train for a further 12 minutes, and again for 24 minutes. One might say the flight path of the UFO simply coincided with the train's movement if it hadn't been for a completely exceptional incident on February 17, 1987, at the opposite end of the country, in Karelia. A glowing sphere, clearly recognizable as a saucer, took position in front of the engineer's cab and began to pull the train uphill. The engineer quickly radioed the nearest station to report the critical situation. the station attendant ran out onto the platform and saw the incredible sight: a glowing sphere pulling the train at a speed of 50 kilometers per hour. Then the UFO moved aside but soon returned and braked so abruptly that the engineer almost hit the windshield with his head. And that wasn't all. 25 minutes later, the sphere reappeared, took its position in front of the train, and began towing the train, without the engineer turning on the engine. The UFO towed the 280-car train, demonstrating the capabilities of extraterrestrial science and technology. Only when it finally departed toward Finland could the engineer and his assistant catch their breath. It seems that in both cases, the aliens were deliberately testing their influence on earthly life, particularly on powerful and reliable transportation systems, either paralyzing or aiding them. We would do well to ponder the implications of this experiment. These incidents, precisely timed, affected vital railway arteries. This was, in a sense, celestial extortion. It's as if we were warned about who could take control in such situations. UFO power outages were documented earlier in Baltimore and Philadelphia in 1957. In Salta, Argentina, and Uberlandia, Brazil, in 1959. In Vukovar, Yugoslavia, in 1961. In Cuernavaca, Mexico, in 1965, and in Araxa, Tunisia, in 1981. In 1981, UFOs shut down all operations at a military facility in the Gorky region in Russia. During the U.S. war in Vietnam, a UFO hovered over the Inga Trench base at an altitude of 100 to 150 meters. It shut down all diesel generators on the base, turned off the electrical systems of 2 aircraft preparing for takeoff, and even neutralized a tanker stationed offshore. If anyone doubts the intentional nature of such actions, in several cases, visitors themselves demonstrated how it's done. In August 1955, in Bedford, Indiana, USA, a UFO positioned itself near a house, turned off the lights, and began to pulsate, alternating between lighting up and dimming. And in sync with its pulsations, the house lights would turn on and off. The most dangerous incidents involve aircraft and helicopters. In September 1967, a fiery sphere attacked an AN-24 passenger flight from Zaporizhzhia to Volgograd. The UFO's magnetic field shut down the plane's engines, causing it to dangerously descend. Only after it reached a critical altitude of 100 meters did the UFO retreat, and the pilot managed to restart the engines. But sometimes it ended differently. In October 1973 at Mansfield Air Base, Ohio, a saucer dove toward a helicopter at an alarming speed. Fearing a collision, the chopper attempted an emergency landing. But it wasn't so easy. The saucer pulled the helicopter up with it. It finally let go when the helicopter reached an altitude of 1,140 meters. Lieutenant Colonel Coyne, the pilot, even gave a presentation about this incident to one of the United Nations committees. Unfortunately, such experiments don't always end well, as happened with the MiG-21 jets near Irkutsk in April 1984 and May 1985, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of people. In both cases, UFOs were nearby. Investigative commissions attributed the crashes to human error, yet the pilots were highly experienced. There is little doubt that the magnetic and radiation properties of UFOs can render both people and aircraft helpless. Join us for Episode 5 of The Alien Agenda, where we will be examining how these craft operate, with specific focus on UFO light beams.